Bienvenidos, Ushamdi, and welcome Anne Arundel Community College learners from the Spring 2023 semester taking the CTS-233 Section 400 Network Programmability course. This is the Cisco Networking Academy's DEVASC 200-901 Certification Exam Preparation course, and in this lab and tutorial, we're going to be focusing now on 8.6.7, where we are going to construct a series of Python scripts. It's not just one script. We're going to be creating at least 7 small Python scripts to manage Webex Teams. So what are you going to learn how to do in this video? Well, the assumption is that you've got a Webex Teams account. I'm going to show you how you get your Webex Teams access token. We're going to test the token. Then we're going to manage some people in Webex Teams. We're going to manage rooms, memberships, and then we're going to learn how to send some messages into a Webex room. And so let's go ahead and dive in. So if we pop over here to our virtual machine, if you're on the DevASC virtual machine, you would come into Labs, DevNet Source, Webex Teams. If you're not, that is okay. You can still do everything you see me doing here, irrespective of whether you have the DevASC virtual machine or not. So let's go ahead and jump into developer.webex.com. You can see I'm already logged in. If you don't have an account, make sure that you go ahead and create one. And then what we're going to do is we're going to click on the documentation link. And you're going to find over here on the left-hand side, there is tons of documentation here. Now, we're really interested in the APIs. And I usually come down, if you click on the Getting Started tag, you can see right here that you're going to have your bearer token. And this is what we're going to be sending as a value in a dictionary key value pair as part of the HTML headers, or HTTP headers. So we're going to be sending this bearer token in the HTTP header field along with the content type that we're going to be sending all of our information in, and that's going to be JSON, where you see that application/JSON. So you're going to want to go ahead and copy this. Now, take note, this key is only good for 12 hours, meaning if I come back here tomorrow at 5 o'clock, then I'm going to have to go ahead and grab a new bearer token, which means I'm going to have to go back into my scripts and update that token value. So I've already copied this token off. So now let's jump over here and take a look at testing the token. Well, how would we test the token? That's going to be step number 2. And you can see I've got things kind of listed out here as to the order that we would go in. And so if we were to take a look at the authentication.py, so that's going to be our first script. So P3, authentication.py. So let's walk this here and see what we're doing. We're importing the requests, right? And we know we do a requests.get to send our HTTP GET. We're going to import the JSON library as well, because we're going to be using the JSON library to not only produce some JSON output for us, but we're going to use that dumps method in order to do that. Here's my access token. And then we've got a variable Webex URI, and we assign it the value of the webexapis.com v1 people me. Now, you might be wondering, well, wait a second, where did you figure that out? Well, let's take a quick step back to the documentation. And if we look at the Webex API section right here, you'll notice that there's an API section on admin, calling, contact center, devices, meeting, messaging. And then if we click on full API reference, that is usually where I come. And if you scroll down here, you can see they've got all kinds of options and alphabetically people. So just like the MapQuest page that we saw in Module 4 when we looked at their documentation, the Webex for Developers page has the documentation as well. So we can do a GET request. Well, what would that look like if we wanted to look at a list of people, or we wanted to create a person? Now, you're going to need to be the admin from Webex to do something like that, but we're going to be using a lot of the GET requests. What if you want to get a person's details? You would use that as your base URI. And down here, get my own details. So if I click on this, and this is pretty cool, you can see it auto-magically dumps my bearer token in here, and it knows what that value is because I'm logged in to developer.webex.com. So all I need to do from here is click, well, you could click on try it, which would show you this, and then we're going to click on run. And you're going to see a whole bunch of JSON data here. We get our HTTP response code of 200 OK. And here is all of my Webex data. So I can go ahead and test this right here. But what I could also do, and again, you can copy that and then pull it over, but you'll see we're not doing any calling data. We're not going to be checking that. We're just going to be grabbing the details for me. So here is a quick little sort of documentation page that shows you the information that you can see and what you're going to get and what data type it might be, right? So to be JSON strings, which obviously when we're working with it in Python is going to turn into being a Python string. So you've got all kinds of information that we're going to get here, and this tells you everything you need to know. So if I drop back over here, you can see that we're going to be sending some HTTP headers in. And here, we're not actually sending anything for content type. I'm simply sending in my authorization bearer token. Now remember, this is a string. We're using the format method with the string, meaning that's just a placeholder, and it's representing that value right there. So we're sending our bearer token value in, which is this string Y, Z, blah, 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 and that is going to authenticate me. Now, it says authorization, but it's authenticating us. And then we're going to capture that HTTP response from our requests.get. We're going to get a response object back. And what's the request? Well, we're simply sending in the Webex URI. We know what that is. It takes us all the way down to people, me, and then comma, and then what is the header information I'm sending in? So instead of using the URL lib.parse URL encode to kind of put all this together, we simply use the base URI, and then we leverage the HTTP headers by sending in dictionary key, or I should say, yeah, dictionary key value pairs. And then we just say headers after the base URI. And then we're going to print out the JSON.dumps, and we want to see it indented and nice and pretty so that it looks reasonable. All right, let's go ahead and say Python 3, and we'll say P3, and we'll take a look at the authentication. And there we go. So we get back a Python dictionary or a JSON object, and it's got all of my information in it. Now, if I was to capture this as JSON data into a variable name in my Python script, I could then access things by doing the ID key in order to get the key value, right? Or nickname in order to get the nickname. And so you could parse through this data and pull all kinds of very cool information out. And it looks identical to what we saw when we did the quick, hey, let's test this. Okay, so that takes care of part 3, or I should say, just the script that we were using there. So now we want to take a look at listing people. And what is that going to look like? Well, guess what? It's going to look really similar. We're importing requests. We're importing JSON. We've got that Webex bearer token, which I just put in here as Webex. Oh, I'm sorry. This is a Webex ID. This is the ID for me, right? And we saw this on the previous output that we were looking at. So when I did, and let me run this really quickly again, I apologize there. So you can see it shows you my ID, right? That begins with Y2LZ. Well, when I say more on this, you can see Y2LZ. So I'm creating a variable and we're assigning it the value of this super long ID string that identifies me in Webex. And then here is our access token. So up to this point, the only new thing is we've created a variable name for my Webex ID. Now, the Webex URI is going to change a little bit here. We're going to come all the way down to people, and then we've got this open curly brace, close curly brace. Again, a placeholder for the string format method, meaning whatever that represents, which is the Webex ID, it's going to get dumped right in here. And so you could actually create an interactive script that prompts the user of the script, give me the Webex ID. They paste that in, and then the code just runs based off of this, right? It assigns whatever that user input is to Webex ID, and then that's going to get used here. And now here you can see we've got 2 HTTP headers. We've got our authorization header, which is just the same thing. It's my access token that I'm passing in to say, hey, Webex API, I am authorized to do this. So let me come on in and get some information about this user based on their Webex ID. And then how am I sending that information in? The information is being sent in as JSON, right? I'm sending it in as JSON. And then we've got some parameters here. Now, these parameters, these are additional kind of nuggets of information that I can add in. And you can see down here, I'm sending email and then my email address. Now, the HTTP response object that we're going to get back from our requests.get is going to be the result of that Webex URI, which is all of this information here, including my Webex ID, the headers, which are going to authenticate me and tell the server I'm giving you JSON, and then the parameters, which are the email, the key value pair of email, and then my email address. And then we end up getting this data back, and it's going to look nice and pretty in JSON format, or, as a dictionary. And so let's take a quick look here. Let's transition over here, though. And, we were listing the people out, right? And remember, when I say list people, you can come down here and you can see query parameters, right? So we can use a string, a display name, an ID, an origin ID. So those are all of the things that you can put in here, and you can try it out right over here. All right, so let's step back over here and let's go ahead and let's run this script. So let's say, instead of more P4, let's say Python 3. All right, and there it goes. And so based on the information that I passed in, here is all of the information for me. Again, and look, it looks very similar to what we just saw previously, but that is the information for me when we go to list out people. So if you had somebody else's ID, or you could use my ID if you wanted to type it in, you would find that information out here. All right, so that's going to take care of listing out the people. And they wanted to use, I think they did it with the email address and they did it with the ID, so you could flip back and forth as to how you want to do that. I had them both in there. But we're going to get that information back. So now we're going to manage some rooms using our Python scripts and the Webex API. And so now we're going to list out the rooms. And so to list the rooms, it's the P5-list rooms. So again, these scripts look very repetitive. Import request, import JSON. I've got the access token. Here is the URI down to the API server's rooms functionality. And then we've got our headers. My authentication with my access token, which is the authorization, and then the bearer value, authorization key, bearer value. And then I'm telling the API server, yeah, I'm giving it to you in JSON, right? And then I'm going to limit, right? So here's a parameter we can use when you go to look at the rooms or get rooms. You can limit it to 50. So I think the lab limits it to 100, but we can limit it to 50. And then we have our HTTP response object, right? The response we get back from the Webex API server, which we get when we send the requests.get get method in, and we just pass in that information. We say, hey, we're going to the rooms Webex URI. My header information has my bearer token and the content type I'm giving you. And then the parameters, hey, limit it to 50, right? It's as simple as that. And I'm going to print out the HTTP response in JSON format. And I guess we're going to do it in both formats here, which I think they have you do in the lab, which is we're going to show you the raw kind of output, and then we're going to show it prettified with an indentation of 4. So let's go ahead and say Python 3 P5, and we're going to list rooms out. And you're going to see that I'm in a bunch of rooms here. A lot of these go back to Cisco Lives, right? So you can see the breakout section, 2695, building enterprise access control architecture using ICE. So here are all the rooms that are associated with me or that I am participating in, right? So we get a lot of this information, and what's going to happen is we're now going to go ahead and we're going to create a room. And so let's take a look at how we might do that. Now that's going to be P5 dash, not get room details. There it is, create room. All right, so what do we need to do to create a room? Again, you import requests in JSON. So if you're looking at this and thinking, I should probably just cut and paste a lot of this from file to file, 100%, right? Reuse the code. And then we're going to go down to the rooms Webex API path here. And then again, the headers, authorization, and then the content type. Now, what are the parameters that we can send into the rooms as well? Well, we just saw that we can list the rooms out, right? And I can do a parameter saying, I only want to see a max of 50 rooms. And that was when we did a GET request. This is going to be a POST request. So we're not sending a GET request in. This is a POST request. So if we were to go back to the documentation and I was to come down and say, hey, what about rooms here? And I clicked on rooms, you could see that, yeah, I can get a room based on details based off the ID, but what about this post right here, create a room? Well, here you go, and you can try it out. And the title is the only thing that's required, right? The title is the only thing that's required. And so that's actually what we're going to be sending in. So you could take a look and read through this here, and let's take a look at an example of what that might look like when we go to create a room. And so the title, which is required, we're going to call it Trav CTS-233 Test Room 02. And in fact, let me change that real quickly here. We're just going to change that to Test Room, and we'll make it 99, right? Make it something cool here. And we're going to want to make sure we grab the ID that we see when this script runs, P5 create rooms. And so that is going to create the room. And you can see right here is where we get the room ID. So now that I've got this room ID, I'm going to hold on to that for a second. But you can also see we get some other information here around the room. What type? It's a group. Is it locked? No. Last activity in the room, the creator ID, right? So there's my user ID. So if you wanted to check to see who created the room, you could run a GET request for the room details on the room ID and find out the creator ID, and then search for people looking based on the user, the creator ID, or the ID of the, the ID of the user. Okay, so that created the room. How can we check that? Well, guess what? If I come over here to my Webex rooms, there it is right there. So that was not there before, it just created it. So we had this test room here. I've got this other test room right here that I just created with my script. And you can see I am the only person in this room. So let's go ahead and step back over here. I've already copied this. Let me grab that again because it may not have, oops, let's make sure we get the whole thing with the quotes. All right, so we're going to grab this room ID because we want to keep that, because now using the room ID, we can run a script to get details, right? To get the room details. And so let's do an ls, and let's say vi p5 get room details. So again, we start at the top here, import request, JSON, there's my bearer token. Aha, the room ID, here it is. So if I was to pull this back, and we're going to put our new and improved room ID in here that we just created, which is that room 99, that's the ID. And so what are we doing here? Well, webexapis.com rooms, that value right there, what do you think that is? Yeah, that's a placeholder for the room ID, which we just pasted in. So room 99, we'll call it. And then again, the HTTP header information. Here's my bearer token for authentication. Here is how I'm giving you the information, Webex API server. I'm giving it to you in application JSON format. And then we send an HTTP GET request, right? Because we're not posting here, we're getting information. And so I capture that response object in the HTTP response variable name here. And we send that Webex URI in, which is right here. And the headers have my bearer token and the content type. And then we're going to print out what we get back. In other words, we're going to print out the response in JSON format. We're going to do it raw. We're going to do it pretty. And it's going to give me all the information about that room. And so we know how to get information about people. We know how to create a room. Well, here is how you would get the details of that room. So we'll say Python 3 and hit run. And there you go. So you get the room ID here, we get the meeting link, we get the SIP address, you get the meeting number, the meeting ID, and then you get it up here in sort of the raw format. And down here, we've kind of formatted this. Whoops, let me make sure we get the right text here. We've formatted that, indenting 4 spaces just to make it a little bit easier. And so that's how you would go about getting the room details. All right, So now we're going to list the memberships, right? We're going to list who's a member of a specific room. Well, to do that, we need a room ID. So let me go ahead and grab the room ID right here. And if we're going to list out the membership, it's going to be, we'll say VIP6 and list memberships. And so again, at the top, we import requests in JSON. Here's where we're going to put in the new room ID because I used that room ID earlier. So let's just replace the old room ID with that new room 99 ID. Now, we're probably only going to see me in there because no one else is in there. And again, we've got the access token, right? Our bearer token. We're going to go down to memberships in our URI, and then we're going to send in the headers. We're going to send in the parameters, which is room ID, and then the room ID, which I just pasted in here. So that's the parameter, right? Give me the membership information about that room ID. We send our HTTP GET request in. We capture the response object in the HTTP response variable name, and then we're going to print out that JSON data. So, interacting with Webex is super, super simple, super convenient. And so let's pull this back up and let's just come back down here to, Python, Python 3, and we'll run this, and there you go. And it shows you who's in here. It shows you just me. Now, if you ran this on a room where there were more people, then you would get a list of all of those people. But for right now, it's just going to show you me, right? All right. Well, that is how we get the membership information. So now we're going to create a membership, right? In other words, we're going to go ahead and we're going to add somebody into one of the Webex rooms. Let me double check here. I think that's what we're doing. Yeah, I think we're going to add somebody into one of the Webex rooms. List membership, create membership, right? So let's jump into P6-create membership. And so you can see here, that's the old room ID. I think, I'm not even sure if it's in the buffer here. Let's check and see if that room 99 is in here. And I will drop that in there and let's see. Yeah, so we'll use that right there. And I believe that's the room ID for room 99. And you can see I've got my email address in here. We've got the access token. Again, a lot of this stuff repeats itself. So we're going down to memberships, but here's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be adding in the personal email of the person that we are adding in here. So let's go ahead and save this. And what we should see is it should come back and say that I'm already in there. But this is how you would add. Yeah, user is already a participant in the room. So what you would want to do is find somebody that's not, and then you would run that same script with their information, right? And that's how you can add people to rooms. I don't want to use somebody's personal information here. That way their email address doesn't get exposed, so forth and so on. So I just use mine. And then there we go. All right, so now we are on the final part of this lab, part 7, where you're going to learn how we can send messages into a Webex room. So let me go ahead and say more on P6 and list memberships, and we're going to grab that room ID again to make sure we've got that in our buffer. So we'll say copy right there. And what we're going to do here is in P7, we're going to change the room ID. And now take a look at this, right? I've got my room ID here, and then I've got the message I want to send to the room. Now, don't make the mistake I made many years ago. I think it was about five, maybe 6 years ago when I was testing some of this functionality that you see here. And I decided that I would go ahead, and I didn't know what other room to send it to. So I sent it to the room that had all the instructors who were taking this course. Not this course, but a course that I was taking at the time. And let's just say after the third test of me sending in some bogus message with my script, I was quickly reminded that I should probably just create a new room and use that. So you definitely want to do this in a test room. Don't do this in a room where you've got a whole bunch of other people, right? It's not going to be productive. So we've got the room ID for room 99. We've got the room message. We're just going to say hello there. I've got my access token. We're going to come down to that URI. Again, you've seen, this is kind of, wash, rinse, repeat. We've got the headers, the parameters, the room ID. We need that. and then the markdown. And what is the markdown? It's just the message that I'm sending in. That's the variable name right there in this key value pair. And here it is. Room message is just hello there. Now, you could make this interactive so that you prompt the user, hey, what's the message you want to send, right? And then you could have it be dynamic. But here we've got it hard-coded in. So let's run this, and then we're going to see some output here that we're capturing from that HTTP response object. So let's say Python 3 and P7. Now, you're going to notice we get all this information back, right? And here it is, nice and formatted. It tells you who sent it, what the markdown was. Here's the HTML, when it was created. So let's go take a look at that room, though. So if I pop into room 99, whoops, sorry. Did I send that to the right room? Yeah, I did. Okay, there it is. I thought maybe I was in the wrong room. All right, so there it is. So let's do this, right? And here's how, this is also a quick way to receive a 0 on this assignment, is if you decide to do this with the room that we are all in as part of this course. Again, remember, pick a fake room, a testing room, do it there, so that you can sit here and do something like this and say, okay, well, I ran this a whole bunch of times. Let me step over here, and there you go, right? So this is exactly what you want to have happen. And you just used your test room to do that. So very cool stuff here in lab 867. We constructed 7, probably closer to 8 or 9 Python scripts to manage Webex Teams. Absolutely fantastic. All right, well, this is the last official lab of the course. We've got 2 more packet tracer activities we're going to take a look at. And then after that, we are all done with packet tracer and lab activities for the course. As always, I hope you guys are learning from this. I hope you've got a bunch of takeaways. And more importantly, I hope you now have more questions in your head as how might I do this? How could I approach this? Because questions are way more valuable than answers. All right, thank you so much for watching as always, and I hope to see you in the next video.